So if you haven't met me already at the conference, I've had the pleasure of being here a number of times over the years and sort of punctuated different phases in my career by representing some businesses on the stage. First of all, private property, a property portal platform in South Africa, and then more recently, Matula Group, Life Will Connect. I remember speaking at one of these conferences about a transaction building business that we were building in Thailand in the .property business. And now REW, all the way over in North America, on the far west coast, Vancouver. So it's been an interesting road across the real estate marketplace world. I've had the opportunity to look at emerging markets, developed markets, single agent markets, two agent markets, and so it gives you quite an interesting cross-section of what's happening. But by far the biggest challenge has been building a real estate marketplace business in an established market like Canada with an incredibly strong industry ecosystem that's been built, in various ways across different states over the last 20, 30 years. So I'll tell you a little bit about REW's story and pick apart some of the themes that we've picked up through the conference already and how we're building them into our business model going forward. So first of all, who is REW? REW stands for Real Estate Works. It's actually a 40-year-old brand. It started in the newspaper sector as Real Estate Weekly. At one point, there were 500,000 newspaper copies going out, 800 pages of real estate, really simple, easy user experience. It's now a completely digital business, and in the last 10 years has become the leading property portal in the west of Canada. So we're across all the major English-speaking markets in Canada, but certainly the West is our area of dominance. We like to think of ourselves not as a real estate brand, but as an adventure brand. Real estate is one of life's great adventures, at least that's the way we see it. It's an uncertain journey. People start out and they have no idea of how they're going to achieve their goals or their ambitions, and we help them do that. So what does the real estate adventure look like in Canada right now? It's very similar to the tail of the tape in the major metros in the US. In the North American market, it's quite similar. There are too few homes available. That's the major crunch that we're finding now in Canada. In fact, as a G7 nation, it's got huge housing undersupply. So there are at least 2 million homes fewer than other G7 countries by housing availability statistics. So there's a big pressure there in terms of housing supply. That's had a dramatic impact in housing affordability. So you've seen this huge demand increase during the pandemic. There was sort of a switch that was flicked, and Canadian populace, particularly a younger Canadian populace that was very happy to travel all over the world and experience what the world had to offer, was now looking to set up shop, buy a house, have a backyard, live the North American dream. But it's now more expensive than ever. That's driven a price increase of 40 to 50% in the major metros just since 2019. And already it was an expensive housing market. So incredibly difficult for younger Canadians to get into the housing market. But they really want to. There is so much new blood in the market. Millennials in particular represented between 40 and 50% of transactions in the last year in the Canadian market. And even though the ramp-up in millennial buyers has been significant, there are at least 2 million more of them. If you look at the housing adoption rates of previous generations, of the boomers and the Gen Xers, you've got this headroom of at least another 2 million people that will come into the market if they adopt home ownership at the same rate as previous generations. Another thing that I think has come out, maybe not so much in this conference, but certainly in the industry more broadly in North America, is the sense that agents are not being disrupted. In fact, if you look at the type of transaction that occurs in real estate, it is this roller coaster, this difficult journey, this series of ups and downs and challenges. And as much as we try to remove the friction and improve the experience, there is a limit to how much is possible. And so the real estate transaction is still one that people seek out guidance, they seek out advice, they seek out expertise that they believe they don't yet have, and often they find that in the hands of real estate agents. So one thing that I found incredibly fascinating is in the period between 2002 and 2020, when you see this incredible influx of new models, from the Zillows to the Redfins to the all of the transactional models that we're now seeing with Knock and OfferPad and Opendoor, there are more people transacting with agents today relative to the total market than there were 20 years ago. And so that speaks to this need for guidance and advisory service in the real estate process. And so this is sort of what it looks like today. You know, when you think of a guided experience, you think of a real estate agent, and real estate agents are not perfect. And I know we've been saying that for the last 20 years. But they're really not perfect as a guide because they fulfill this last mile, in a way, of the real estate transaction. And even if you speak to the best agents in the market, they'll tell you exactly that. I don't want to talk to somebody that's not in a transaction moment. I gear my entire business around that transaction moment. And of course, not all agents are created equal. So even if you're talking to the best agents, they don't want to deal with the customer all the way through the customer journey, but you're likely not talking to the best agent. You know, as a Canadian example, you've got less than 10% of the agents doing 80% of the transactions. And consumers have no easy way to match with that top 10% of the agent market. So this is our hypothesis for at least how we see the REW business developing and how we see these marketplace shifts into the transaction more broadly. The hypothesis is really quite simple. Moving starts a long, long time before moving day. So there are a huge number of contact points and interactions and advice and confidence-gathering moments that home seekers and consumers go through on their way to a property transaction. And most of those are unguided, or the guidance is very fragmented. So you've got property portals, you've got real estate blogs, you've got commentators on Instagram and YouTube, and you name your platform. You've got agents, all of them trying to market to consumers, at consumers, either with advice or with you know, pretty bus ads, but you don't have a consolidated and easy guided experience for a home seeker. There's not the representative customer journey happening in many of these platforms. And I think the car guys at the conference have spoken a little bit about that in the automotive space, is the fragmentation of the industry, the way dealers work and wholesale and auctions and everything, has created an upstream problem. And exactly the same is true in real estate. You've got very established, industrialized industry setup that creates noise and confusion on the front end of the consumer experience. So we want to grow into the transaction like everybody does. But if you just start with that thought, taking a portal business and turning it into a transaction business, and as I said, we had some experience doing that in Thailand, you get the choice. You can either grow from your area of strength as a marketplace and move towards the transaction, or you can set up an agency team, tell no one about it, and kind of grow from the transaction back into the portal. And we've tried, or the businesses I've been part of have tried both approaches. And the danger of taking a too transaction-centric approach is that you become like every other transaction player. And who is every other transaction player? Real estate agents, brokerages. There are an increasing number of innovative models in the US in particular, where you see tech-enabled brokerage, and that's largely driven by the fact that the supply aggregation exists within the MLS, at least of a subset of the content in the real estate market, the agent listings. And so you can build a pretty good marketplace experience on top of your brokerage without having to be an actual marketplace. And that's, I think, quite unique to the North American continent. Elsewhere in the world, it's difficult for a broker to truly have a marketplace experience. But what we're doing at REW is taking the approach of growing into the transaction, but from the marketplace. We see ourselves first and foremost as a guide to the home seeker, and if we can create a guided experience, we can obviously guide them to better transaction experiences. But it starts with the marketplace, it doesn't start with the transaction. A little bit about Canada. If you don't know Canada, I certainly didn't know Canada. I arrived a couple of years ago, having visited Vancouver once while the sun was shining. It doesn't shine that often. But the Canadian real estate market is a huge sector of their GDP. As I said, it's structurally quite similar to what you see in the US, but it's like a thin cross-section across east to west of the US. So you've got great geographic fragmentation, but it is a real estate mad society. So you talk about two things in any conversation with a stranger, the weather and real estate. We sit upstream of a big industry. Excuse me. So we sit upstream of this big industry, and we want to be the ultimate guide in those people's real estate adventure. And so what does that mean? I'll take you through just the structure of where REW is set up and where we're investing our time, effort, and energy. First of all, there's the real estate search. As I said, building a real estate search platform or building a marketplace platform in the US or in Canada is simpler than the rest of the world because you've got a large sector of agent listing supply accessible through the MLS. Unfortunately, you have to play by their rules, and those rules are difficult to play by sometimes. But what it does allow you is to bring in all the agent listings. But I think what's missing, what's obviously missing in our market is the synthesis of other content sources. So we do a lot to bring in buildings, projects, especially new home projects. There are thousands of those that are just not aggregated on any platform alongside MLS listings. We bring in agent search, so there's a big agent matching capability that sits inside of the website, and I'll talk a little bit about that some more. And then there's rentals, and this is also fascinating. You see this big split and divide between rentals and sales in the North American market. So this is the most established part of our business. This is the least established part of our business. So, excuse me. This is one of the areas that I didn't hear a lot of people talk about in the conversations today and in the previous presentations, is this idea of the content ecosystem, the creator ecosystem. And what you're seeing increasingly is this rise of, excuse me, it's a great time to get a frog in the throat, mid-presentation, midstream. Yeah, the content ecosystem is fascinating. I've been watching this in the new car space in particular. There is a completely different way to buy new cars. I didn't use a classified site almost at all. I only used YouTube and some of the platforms that were attached to YouTube. And so I can see this model coming into real estate quite strongly. This idea of independent commentators and opinions and thought leaders around a particular topic driving engagement. I mean, you look at some of the guys in the car space, and it's millions and millions of views per review on a particular car. And if at least that experience is unserved in the real estate space. You've got some commentary, but usually it's very self-serving by real estate agents, and you don't have major platforms, with the exception of at least one. I think the best example I've ever seen of this is Idealista News in Spain. So they built an incredible brand and following just around real estate commentary, news, and advice. So we're investing significantly in this. We're creating a content ecosystem. Writers, editors, copywriters, and video editors and video creators. And really the idea is to build out the community and expand the reach of the advice and guidance component, because ultimately that's the role that I think the marketplace plays, is in the confidence-building aspect of real estate. So we call this the REW Studio, and it's going to be an increasingly big part of the business that we do, is developing the content, augmenting the content around real estate, not just relying on listings. Listings are a classified model paradigm, and I think they're critical content, but I think you need to see them just as a content asset like any other content asset. And how can you create and build even more content in a content-hungry world? One of the other content assets that we have is the agent themselves. And so, agent profiles have existed on portals almost as long as portals have existed. But agent profiles have never really been a dynamic view on an agent. They've never really been a matching-worthy, high-fidelity view on local real estate professionals. And so we set out to create that with REW.1. REW.1 is our, we call it an agent reputation platform. But effectively, we take all of the signals that we have access to through the marketplace, and we associate it to the agents. So there's sold listings, there's reviews. We've got 30,000 reviews on agents that we aggregate from Google, Facebook, Yelp, and a third of those come from our own review system. And the idea, ultimately, is to create the agent match, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you don't know your agent, and if you're not able to position your agent effectively, then how can you do matching? Then we've got new homes, and I'll talk a little bit about new homes because I think new homes are one of the most exciting sectors in North American real estate, and they get very little bit of airtime. Everybody talks about the agent economy. There are 2 million agents in North America, and so everybody gets very excited about the resale potential. But as I said, many of these major cities are completely underserved in terms of housing. And so we have this great opportunity to pick up on a major trend of building for this future generation. Not only that, but in Canada in particular, it's an immigration market. So 500,000 new people arrive ready to buy real estate every single year, and they need to be housed. That's net new people that need to be housed. And so the new project economy is a really exciting space to play in, and it's a space that's very underserved. You don't have a lot of other conventional brokerages playing in this space. This is an opportunity for platforms, and we believe we're best placed in Canada to do this, but certainly marketplaces are best placed to create the new home experience. You've got the listing aggregation, you've got the traffic, you've got the engagement, you can produce content at scale, and often projects are a content exercise. You can talk about a building without even having a listing. You can talk about its impact in a neighborhood. You can talk about evaluate between different projects and which one is likely to get the best return or have the best lifestyle aspects. We did a content piece recently, which is fascinating. The developer says, I'll put all these fantastic amenities into a project, but they don't explain any of those amenities. So we went and said, okay, well, what does a Nordic spa system look like? And what is and we sent a guy and he reviewed a Nordic spa, and it was an incredible piece of content. But it drives new home shoppers into our community and ultimately into our transaction path. And this is a business I'm very excited about. So as I said, REW, quite a traditional business, shifted to digital, large digital footprint, but very much a portal business. We're standing up our own mortgage business actually on Monday. Monday we launch REW Money, and REW Money is a full concierge service mortgage journey. And a lot of portals and platforms have already done this, but obviously finance is a very key decision for a lot of people, and we want to bring the money conversation in earlier. So our point of difference is just going to be first. If you're looking at homes, that's where you start. If you're looking at your options in a neighborhood, that's where you start. But ultimately, the money conversation is almost taboo until the time you've signed an offer. And we want to just make the conversational commerce opportunity happen much sooner. So that's what we call guided real estate search. Key categories. What does it look like inside of our business? Those 6 headings on the top are really how we think about the development of REW, and I think the development of a lot of marketplace businesses in real estate going forward. The 3 on the left are the evolution of the guide, the evolution of the confidence creating resource for consumers to draw new people into the home ownership economy, to develop their acumen and their insight, and to give them a sense that this brand, this marketplace brand, really represents them and their needs. So we think about that in 3 key verticals, or 3 key parts of a flywheel: the concept of content, community, and connection. And so obviously the content piece I've discussed, you need to have as much content as possible. It needs to be rich, it needs to be engaging, it needs to be focused around the community you're looking to build. The community is something that, portals have been good at building in the past, but not good at understanding. So we call it audience. What's the difference between an audience and a community? What's the difference between a community and an individual? And so really trying to understand that. And ultimately the connection. What is this connection that real estate partners are looking for, and what is the connection that home seekers are looking to get? And this is an area of the business where we're increasingly getting more involved. So fire and forget has been the name of the game in real estate for a long time. I think somebody said it in the auto vertical: it's lead, form fills, and passed on to dealers. We're building capacity in the business to have an advisory conversation. And so those are actually REW advisors, and they sit in one of those 3 categories. So we've got pre-sale advisors, agent advisors, and as I said, money advisors. And then we ultimately want to be in the transaction. I think everybody does, and we believe that we can create at least a guided experience or an augmented experience. I don't think it's a disruptive experience. I don't think it's a replacement or a substitute to some of the partners that are in the channel. In some cases, like in money, it is. But in this case, we will be playing an augmentation role. But that's the tech-enabled customer journey, and that's the piece where, frankly, we have the least experience. So we're learning lessons, we're trying to partner. This money business is a venture with the biggest mortgage lender in Canada, so there's an opportunity there for us to learn a lot from them. And then we're doing it in those 3 streams. And everybody's shown these kinds of graphs. The good news is mine started 3 years ago, so at least there's some evolution and proof. But certainly there's the compounding impact to revenues. As we can add to the marketing and advertising business with the revenue generated out of the transaction, we can grow this business faster and faster. And so that's really how we see REW developing. Market expansion across the rest of Canada, some of the key markets where we still feel we're underserved. And then who knows, maybe into the transaction in the US. That could perhaps be the next conversation. Yeah, sorry about the gravelly voice, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Simon, thank you very much for that. I don't know if you're getting a lot of sympathy from some people in the audience for the self-inflicted frogs in throat. Okay, does the agent have to pay for their profile?
Yeah, so the way that we structure the REW1 business, it's a very simple membership-based business. So you become a member of REW1. As a member of REW1, you get access to this agent reputation platform. Your listings are prioritized over other agents' listings. And you get access to the rest of the product suite, which includes listing products for listing agents, buyer matching products, which is the key buyer matching side, very similar to Zillow's Premier Agent, and ultimately what we call an Apex product, which is a brand and reputation product, dynamic native advertising, where the agent can promote some of the social proof, the reviews that I spoke about, the sold listings that I spoke about. They build into dynamic ads for them.
Okay. And then the other question we have here is, with regards to new projects, don't some developers want to own the content by themselves and therefore dislike portals writing about them?
Not some developers, all developers. So absolutely, this This really is the defining point of the new home market. Guys that are building projects believe that the content and the positioning of the product is 100% their domain. And so it's really difficult to build the kind of marketing relationships that you want with those developers, as I'm sure some of you in real estate portals know, because they want to control the experience end to end, almost to the detriment of any lead generation capabilities. It's more important that it's gold and black and the contact form has 3 things in it, not 2, than it is the performance of the campaign. So what we do and what we're able to do is, because there's a buy-side agency model in the US and in Canada, we're able to represent the home seeker. We're able to represent the consumer's desires and interests in the transaction, and we don't have to worry too much about what the developer wants or doesn't want. So if we're able to build the community of home seekers and introduce them effectively to developer sales offices, they don't need to know how we acquired them.
Right. Are they paying you a commission?
Exactly. So it's a success-based fee or a commission model, depending on the relationship we have with the sales office.
Okay. What's the role of data within REW?
Data is a really interesting question within Canada because data ownership is a big moat that the MLSs try and build for themselves. It is very important to us. It's perhaps not as important as it should be. You see a lot of very, very data-first models in some other marketplaces. For us, we use it to build profiles.